My name is Chris Tromans. I work in the public sector team, and I look after our ISV customers and who are providing solutions, off-the-shelf solutions to customers in the public sector who need to solve specific business problems. We're helping them to migrate to the cloud and to provide additional benefits to those customers through doing that. I'm joined today by three very special guests. Guys, if you'd like to join me on the stage. Just take a seat. I'll give the guys a second to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their products, their projects. But as Patrick mentioned, this session is about large-scale migrations and transformations, and we're very lucky to have these three customers who've chosen to join us today to tell us a little bit about what they've done, the experiences they've had. So first we have Florin from the European Commission. Florin, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and the project you're working on?
Yes, so I'm working as IT Service Manager at the European Commission, dealing with the content management in the data service unit. In our sector, we are dealing mainly with the public web presence of the European Commission. We have, at the moment, more than 150 public websites implemented in Drupal, with a specific distribution we have next Europa. And along with this, we are managing a very large number of other public websites in various other technologies. So we have wikis, we have WordPress, we have other technologies. The web presence of the European Commission has gone through a very long digital transformation in the last years in order to focus on providing a more coherent and user-oriented, cost-effective presence. What I will mainly focus today is on a specific website, EurAccess, that was transformed a couple years ago and now is hosted in the cloud with AWS. We do have a large number of, quite a large number of other sites in various cloud solutions. Using the current cloud framework, we have access to various cloud providers. And one other side that I would like to point out, even if I'm not going to talk about this, is the Join Up. That is a collaboration platform that is providing reusable and is encouraging reusability of shareable solution for IT in the public administration, business and citizens. So anyone in the public is encouraged to check their site. It's a lot of solutions that you can use for implementing your own and providing better value for better service for the citizens. So.
Mulțumesc. Thank you very much, Floyd. Thank you. Philip, if I could turn to you and ask you, this is Philip Clegg, who's the CTO, one of the co-founders from MirrorWeb. Philip, could you tell us a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Try again? No.
I'm the luck now.
MirrorWeb is a web and social media archiving company. We provide web and social media archiving to a number of different organisations. We've got a very strong presence in the public sector. We provide the UK government web archive, which is quite a large archive that's publicly available through the UK National Archives. We also provide the similar service to the UK Parliament, or these are both available online. We also do web archiving for a number of other public sector organisations, although those aren't public archives. So what I was going to talk about today is the transition of the UK government web archive, which is a 120 terabyte archive from a traditional data centre into the cloud.
That's fantastic. Before you pass it back, does your mic work, Bert?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Excellent. So, Bert, thank you. Bert Wayne from the Agentschap Vegans en Verkeer.
Wegen en Verkeer,
the Flemish government's road and traffic agency. Mm-hmm. And Bert, thank you very much for joining us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your project?
My project is, at the agency, I'm responsible for more or less keeping the IT running that supports the administrative business processes at the agency. Back in 2015, 2016, we migrated all of our business applications to AWS. It's a very diverse portfolio of applications running from the database with all of the details about all of our roads in Belgium, with everything under, around, and over the roads. ranging to other applications that really like a road control application, which is used by road controllers, road inspectors. So that these are people. I guess it's like more or less 300 people in the agency that really go on the roads and try to find all kind of issues on the road, like traffic signs that are that have fallen down or that are broken, or pits in the road, and all the kind of stuff. And they, with a tablet, they take a picture of it, they submit it to the backend, which is an AWS. And from there on, administrative people work on those cases and send those make like offers for those cases and send them to contractors in order to get those issues fixed as soon as possible. Next to the applications that are used by our employees, we also have a website that's melpuntwegen.be. It's for now, it's until Monday, it's still an old-fashioned website that's running at an old outsourcer, but also that one we just ported it to AWS. It's ready now for running it. So really, having a very simple application now. It's just an S3 bucket with an index.html file in it and a little bit of scripting around it. It was very easy to make, and it will be we hope that it will be a very lightweight application that will be much more user-friendly than the old one, and also will be much more easier to use on smart devices, because nowadays the old application is to have to take the pictures, save it, and upload it, all the kind of stuff. But all of it, we want to fix it. It will be available Monday.
Fantastic. Dank je wel, Bert. If I could ask you the first formal question, Florin, could you tell me about how technologies help transform your platforms, particularly when it comes to working across different countries?
Yes. So, as I was indicating, I will refer more to the EURAccess, which is a network for researchers, for encouraging the mobility of the researchers and the exchange of information on researcher mobility. Part of this network is, which is backed up by European Commission, is participating about 40 various countries, both European and European, offering the possibility for research companies to get in touch with potential researchers from all over the world and putting them in contact for offering job and putting in place various exchange programs. Initially, up to a few years ago, the site that we were using was actually not a single site, were about 40 websites differently. Each member state that was participating in this program were having their own website, and the information was quite often not synchronized. The researcher needed to check on multiple websites, so if one researcher from Japan would desire to come in Europe, he would have to check separately for France, Italy, Germany, and so on, with the information quite often out of sync and outdated. A couple years ago, they managed to negotiate politically a single solution where the information would be maintained more easier. And following this negotiation, the decision was to maintain all the 40 websites with their current domain names, but at the same time use a single IT solution for providing the content. So due to the constraints that were present at the time in the data center of the European Commission, it was not possible to host this site in this place. So practically, websites that are not in the europa.eu, it's not possible to use them, to host them in the data center. So we had to host them into a cloud solution. With the help of the team working in the cloud framework contract activation and of our DevOps, we're able to put in production this site in end of 2016, so about 1 year and a half ago, in Amazon Cloud. As a result, now there is a central information system that is providing the content for all the websites. The content is synchronized since a single database providing all the content, and it's much easier for doing any changes or updates, and further, it does offer a better performance due to the closeness to the users. So, for example, in this case, with the user CDN, it's possible to get the content much easier and much faster in the various countries around the world. So this was a considerable improvement to the previous situation where the content was hosted in the specific country and access was done remotely for various geographical locations. So with the support of the cloud in this case, it was possible to offer something that would not have been possible differently.
Cool. Really fascinating answer, thank you. Philip, can I maybe ask you about Lambda? And can you tell us about your experiences using Lambda with the UK National Archives?
Sure. Oh, we're actually working. So, just to give you a bit of context, the work we did with the National Archives was the migration of the UK Government Web Archive from the previous supplier into AWS. So the UK Government Web Archive is 20 years of web archives. It's over 4,800 websites. It totaled 120 terabytes at the time we took over the archive. Those archives were stored in 100 megabyte web archive files. So we had 1.2 million files. We didn't have an index of what was in those files. We just had the raw files. So the first challenge we had was moving the data. The previous supplier had, with the National Archives over, I think, a period of about 6 months, transferred the data to the National Archives in Kew on 2 terabyte hard drives, and there was actually 72 2 terabyte USB hard drives. So that was my first challenge. How are we going to get all that data into the cloud? I mean, the obvious thought was Snowball. Snowballs are pretty good, but getting the data from 2 terabyte hard drives into a Snowball was a challenge. I ended up building 2 machines with 8 channels of USB that could run at full speed. We had 16 drives going at once, 10 gigabit per second connections to the Snowballs, and it worked. It took 2 weeks. We transferred the data. I generally work remotely. I go in the morning, connect a load of drives up, monitor the machines remotely, and after 2 weeks we had 2 Snowballs that contained all the data. So all the data sat there, and around that time Amazon had launched the Snowball Edge, which I was quite excited about. We could use the Snowball Edge to run Lambda functions on the box, but I couldn't get any because you don't just launch them. So how could we index this data in a clever way? And I thought we can actually use Lambda functions to actually, as the data hits Amazon S3, as a file gets written, we can run a Lambda function against it. And that's what we did. And we ended up running, it was over 1.2 million Lambda executions as the data transferred into S3. And it was a bit of a test, but it actually worked. And we indexed the data running, 1.2 million Lambda functions, about 50,000 functions per hour in 24 hours. Now, previously that would have had to have been done with a Hadoop job. The data would have had to be moved through EMR, and this way we did it in rapid time. So yeah, that's what we did with Lambda. And well, I could go into numbers, but I think we'll save those for the end because the cost for doing it was astronomically low.
That's a new one, astronomically low. Thank you. I'm not sure, you can hear me now. Next question for you. Can you tell us how quickly your organisation can deploy new capabilities now that you've moved to the cloud?
Very fast. I would say like at least, it depends on kinds of applications, at least 4 times or even, say 8 times faster than before. Like before, like up to 2 months. Now in like the hard cases, it's like 1 week if I have to set up a lot of things or still have to test like new things. I think that the main reasons why we were able to really like cut down in that time will be the tools and handles that AWS provides. AWS provides tools and handles that allow you to automate everything from running up servers, from setting up databases. Platform as a service services, just like Elasticsearch, all that kind of stuff. Everything is available. You have like you have the scripting. If you have like the scripting in place, if you have like a reference architecture, that's kind of like is like how you build your applications. And once you have that like scripted, just if you have new things of new functionalities that almost are complying with that reference architecture, just like in 1 day you can set up new applications. Another thing that really allows us to shift fast is the platform as a services that AWS provides. Examples there are the Elasticsearch or a Redis cluster. Before you have to think about how are we going to set it up, how are we going to make sure that everything keeps on running, that backups are in place, how are we going to restore? You all have to think about that, and now with AWS it's just You just like with the CLI, start it, plug it in, and you know that everything will be running and everything is managed from AWS out. So it really allows you to go much faster. That will be
fantastic. Thanks very much. That's a great example. Florian, if I can come back to you about citizen services. I wonder how citizen services have improved, particularly through the consolidation of the websites that you were talking about earlier on.
Okay, so clearly during this transformation of the websites, one of the main objectives was effectively managing centralized data, which is a big advantage both for the people inserting the content, the editors, for the researchers that have to look the data, for the companies that have to publish their openings or look for potential candidates, and it's in the end leading to an improvement of the research and the research mobilities. Just to give you a few numbers, last month we had only on the central European Commission site of the Euraccess more than 1 million page views with 100,000 dependent visitors. The registered users of the site are about 55,000 users, so 55,000 researchers and research companies that are actively participating and either looking for a new job position or offering research job positions. So this is effectively helping them on getting in touch easier and maintaining the content, while at the same time the central management of the content is providing central information on the procedures and the needs that the researcher have to go through in order to move to another country, especially, for example, if you are referring to people arriving from outside Europe. The improvement of this mobility and international part of the innovation of the research is effectively impacting and is having a positive effect on the growth of the economy. So just a few weeks ago, the European Commission published a report where it was indicated that the research and innovation is the part that is responsible for 2/3 of the growth of the economic growth. So you can imagine that having an improved researcher exchange and scientific exchange at the international level is having a positive impact on the growth in Europe, which is leading for the normal citizens to more jobs and better life. So that's a direct effect for the usual citizen. Another aspect that has to be taken into consideration is the cost. So by lowering the cost, because with a single central infrastructure and IT solution, clearly the cost has been reduced to what has been before. And this is meaning that we can offer a better value for the citizens' money, for the taxpayers' money. So we are public administration, we are spending taxpayer money, and we have to offer improved services. So if we manage to offer better services with less money, this is clearly a big advantage to the citizens.
Great, thank you very much. Philip, could I ask you, earlier on you talked about the value of experimentation, and I wonder if you could give us some other examples or another example of that.
Yeah, so I mean that's one of the things I love about Amazon is that you can experiment. I mean the idea of having a Lambda function on S3 ingest on the snowballs was an experiment. I didn't know if it would work. And we actually processed 1.1 million files. We only had a few that weren't processed due to the size. We then processed those on an EC2 instance. One of the reasons we won the tender for taking over the UK Government Web Archive is we offered a full depth, full faceted search across the entire 20 years of archives. And looking at the way people were doing it, generally full text search indexing of web archives is done with Hadoop clusters. So not having really much experience with Hadoop clusters, I employed or contracted in a Hadoop contractor. And initially we'd been quoted it would probably take about two weeks to do the work. So that was reasonable, it was budgeted for. But after those 2 weeks he came back and told us he needed another 8. Unfortunately we were launching in 6, so we had a problem. So with the experimentation that we've done with Lambda, we didn't move any data from S3. We processed it directly in S3, and if you've got a 100 meg WARC file or web archive file, you don't, a web page is only bits of it. So you don't need to take the whole file and read it if you're only indexing certain content. We had a list of MIME types that we were to index. The obvious ones, PDF, doc, text, and then obviously HTML content. But a lot of the content in there was stuff that we're not interested in, CSS, JavaScript, quite a lot of data that was out of scope. So what we did, I tasked our team internally. We got rid of the Hadoop consultant, he wasn't very good. And I tasked my team internally to do some out-of-the-box thinking, going, can we leave the data in S3 and still process it? And as it was, some of the very good members of our team came up with a way of doing just that. We already had an index of everything that was in those files, but we didn't know what was inside the content of each file. So we used the index that we'd already created to create a filter job. And we did that filtering job with 350 EC2 instances, which we spot purchased. And once that filtering job had finished, it then passed on to an indexing job. And I think it was about 750 servers. And the jobs were actually running concurrently. And it was an experiment again, but within 10 hours, we actually did a full text search index into Elasticsearch of 120 terabytes of data. And we actually processed 1.4 billion documents in those 10 hours. And our team had seen, only a few weeks before, the British Library posted some results about how they'd done with their Hadoop cluster on site in the British Library. They'd managed to record 10 million documents an hour. Well, we averaged 144 million documents an hour. And actually, sometimes it was going up much higher than that, because if it was just HTML content, they were indexing really, really quickly. So I've got a few more ideas up my sleeve of things like this out-of-the-box thinking that I'm not going to talk about just now, but this is what Amazon gives us, this ability to scale. I've just requested 5,000 instances that I hopefully can run in Ireland for and a project that maybe I'll be sat up on stage talking about this time next year. So hopefully, now I've said that on camera, they'll let me have them.
Excellent, fantastic, super interesting. Bert, can you tell us about? Can you share some of the specific workloads that you've moved to the cloud, and what really are the benefits that you see from that?
Right, it mainly are just business applications, a diverse range of business applications, but what I would think really is the great thing that we got out of moving to cloud would be that we have been able to respond very fast and eagerly to business needs. I remember when we were still on the old infrastructure, we started a project, the road control project that I mentioned before, and we had like the vision now we have to digitalize that process, because before the road controllers, they were on the road just with paper filling in all the things that they detected. I had to go to the office, then fill it in an application or in forms, and then in order to be able to work on it. So they had a vision now, we want to digitalize that, and we want people on the road with the tablets, that they can take pictures, and that automatically gets sent to the backend, which I talked about before. And they would save a lot of time. But when we started with the development of the application, there was a lot of support for the application, and the user group was really like excited about, oh yeah, we're going to digitalize, we're going to do our work more efficient, we're going to be able to do inspect better, produce better roads for the end users. But the enthusiasm very fastly faded away. That was mainly because we developed, and we had to ship it to our outsourcer. They put it in production. There was time over that to put things in production, but once it was running in production, there were like issues, things should be different, or this or that should be added, and it was like at least like 2 months in order to get like the request from the business in order to get them fixed. And it even went that far that we had bugs in production that were like fixed 1 week later, and it was hard, very hard for the business, and people had to be on the road with in that time, with their paper, because they wouldn't really rely on the application, so they were on the road with the two things, and the project was like going into disaster, because the people were like, I leave the tablets home and I go with the paper, because at least it works. So, and even going that far, that the management of our agency, so from time to time we have like meetings with the syndicates. We represent the people at the agency, and the people working with the application are quite a big chunk of our agency, and the syndicates were really like complaining at management. Oh, this is impossible that you let the people on the road with paper and a tablet. No, there were really like complaints from syndicates, and around just that time we had decided to move to cloud, and because it was an application that was in active development, it was like chosen the application just to go first to the cloud, and I can say that just in one or 2 months when we moved the application to the cloud, and we really also made it cloud. No, not really cloud native yet, but already we took leverage of the cloud. We had all the automation in place in order to be able to deploy the application very fast. Just like if there was an issue, then the next day or 2 days later, that was solved in production, and really like the project revived again. The people really were like supportive again for the application. They started using the tablet again. And that was really a remarkable thing that happened, and even from management then we heard that in the next meeting with the syndicates, the syndicate really gave like their compliments about how we addressed that problem. And that's like for management that was a really remarkable thing, because mostly the syndicates just complain and don't give compliments to our management. That was one of the key things that very good experience I had with moving to cloud.
Fantastic. That's a great story. Thanks for telling us about that. Cool. Florian, if I could ask you to talk about some of the measurable results that you've seen from the project.
Yes, so, well, one of the first measurable results is the fact that we did measure on cost reduction. So comparing to what we had before, where there was 40 different information systems managed by different teams, or teams in all the countries, having a single one is clearly a bigger improvement. Furthermore, by using the elasticity provided by the cloud, we're able to properly control the cost. So from the beginning, the team worked on providing an automated infrastructure management. So we have, at the moment, about 45 Cloudflare distributions, one for each of the states, not only to the domain, because we still have 40 domains, each one pointing to the same infrastructure, and send the content in a personalized, regional, specific approach, let's call it. This everything has to be managed. So from the beginning, we used CloudFormation for creation of everything, for deploying, managing. One of the targets was effectively as well using the elasticity for reducing the cost, not targeting only along the year elasticity, so targeting big events because there are a large number of events along the year, but as well during the day. So it was possible to have multiple times during the day, increment automatically and decrement automatically based on auto-scalability the size of the infrastructure that's used for serving the web pages. And this is considerably helping with the cost. We observed during the day different patterns of usage, so most of the time we have a peak in the morning and in the evening where researchers are commuting. That's the moment that was perceived in the trends as the biggest moment we are looking and contributing to the community. So during this period of the day, we might go up to 5 or 6 machines that are actively serving the request, while usually we have only 2. Reserving the capacity for the 2, we managed to cut further the cost with, I think it's about 30%, that is the standard offering from Amazon. And with the offering of paying by the second for the EC2 machines, this helped to pay for the additional capacity exclusively for 2 hours per day for about 200 days per year. This led to a cost reduction of about 40 to 50% to what would have been the cost of a similar infrastructure without elasticity. So this, I think, it's a real good result, and this is very clear. Further, since one of the big advantages of using the cloud was the possibility to have access to innovation. So our DevOps team had the possibility to experiment and to had quite large flexibility in doing everything that they needed to do. So they could implement a solution, check it, experiment with it, destroy it, and take it over again multiple times, even during the same day, which effectively allowed for having a very good solution in a very short time. So the time for delivering the full solution for your access site, in this case, was only about 1.5 months. So as soon the contract, the framework contract with the cloud was signed, in about 1.5 months later, the site was already live in production. So it's a very short time for delivering such a solution, which is a very complex one because it's, as well as indicating, we have a large number of CDN, we have scalability, we have EC2 machines, we have RDS, we have Elastic Cache, we have AFS, we have a lot of other technology, everything contributing together. So everything has to be glued together and made working properly in order to make sure that everything will work as desired. That's another big important result, the flexibility and the possibility to innovate, which is not always as easy in another specific situation. So this, I would say, is one big outcome of the usage of the cloud in our case. Effectively having the team being able to use new technology and innovate. That's very important for us.
That's really interesting, and I was fascinated by some of the figures that you mentioned there, and it really shows the impact and the fact that you can innovate around those. Thank you for sharing. And Philip, I know that when we were talking earlier on, you were mentioning some really interesting facts and figures similar to what Florian talked about. I wonder if you could take us through a few of those.
Yeah, so my astronomically low cost for creating the index of 120 terabytes of data was $25. That was for, what was it, 1.2 million Lambda executions. Now there is a free tier, so I think that's why it was so low, but nevertheless, it blew us away. I had to go back and look at the bill a few times and go, was that really the cost? Which then obviously led me on to the second experiment, which was also very, very low. So the cost of running 1,000 servers for 10 hours, although the numbers sort of fluctuated as we stopped doing the filtering job, was actually, because they were spot purchased, we got a 70% reduction in cost. So they were, I think they were R4X large servers, but they actually cost us, looking back at the bill, and again I had to double check it, $187. And I think we were paying about 3 cents an hour, and then only 33 cents an hour, something like that. So I kept requesting more. I kept ringing up the support. Can we have more? Can we have more? Because I wanted to see how far we could push it. And I must admit, we did experiment a few times, and we killed Elasticsearch many times. But that's where the Amazon Elasticsearch service was really handy. We spun up a really large. What was it? We used 136 hours of R4 large over the 10 hours. So I can't remember how many servers I put in there, but we just expanded the cluster until we kind of found we could hit it about that hard, and then we went for the full job. But that only cost us $237 for the 10 hours that we were at that cluster size, and then we scaled it back down to the one that runs the archive today. So there's loads. I mean, when you're doing a big data processing this big, there's lots of numbers we can pull out. I think the thing for me, I was reading a book the other day and it talked about the infinite compute power of the cloud. And it is, for us, we can, as long as you let us have it, then essentially we can just keep throwing machines at problems. But the one that I've sort of been reflecting on as past life, running data centers and net apps and having a limited storage, is I don't worry about storage anymore. We just keep throwing data at it. I think the archive has grown by 30 terabytes in the last year. But it doesn't matter, our fidelity of archives is better, we can go deeper. And yeah, it's this whole concept. I can throw 120 terabytes of data into S3 in Ireland and have it automatically appear in London as a backup. And then I can actually then make it go somewhere else into Glacier. And it's this capability that means I run a very small DevOps team to manage some really, really large data sets. I think the hits we get on the UK Government Web Archive, which is mainly Google and Baidu and all the crawlers, it's about 70 million hits a month. Which we average, we take away all of those. I think we get about 500 million users a month using the service. A lot of the UK government website, when sites are taken out, they actually redirect through to the archive automatically. There's lots of government departments that are all merged over the years into gov.uk. So all of those sites, they're all in there and people are still using them and through our service. We were chatting to the Welsh Government, and that's another contract we've just recently won, and they were saying that since we launched the full text search across the UK National Archives, their actual requests to their archiving service had dropped because people could find stuff through the platform. So yeah, there's many stats and there's been sort of many successes, and yeah, there's lots of more exciting ideas that I want to try and play with and see. And I think that's the thing. You can just play. You can have these moonshot ideas that you sort of throw out there, and if they don't work, you haven't actually spent very much money. The whole concept of running 1.2 million functions and it only costing $25 is a bit crazy.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing so much with that. But I'd like to ask you the last formal question, and then we'll open to the audience. Can you tell us how moving to the cloud has affected the technology and the different companies that you're working with?
In technology, we changed about technology, but there's different things that change in technology. I think when we now have moved to the cloud, our technology is much more up to date than it used to be before. I remember that we had middleware or machines, operating systems that we kept expanding lifetime of them in order. We didn't even want to touch it. We were afraid of touching it, and things eventually sometimes exploded in our faces. And with AWS, it's very different. AWS provides a very up-to-date technology. If you also go cloud native, you make sure that you're not dependent on software versions to a certain level. For instance, also the AWS, with some delay but relatively fast, they bring middleware versions into production, like Elasticsearch. You have already the 6.2 there, but before we would keep sitting on 1.5, just keeping it alive, and with AWS, they bring it out. They prepare the work for us. We don't have to invest ourselves in it. We just, if AWS releases it, they also have a migration workflow for it, and then if we have time, and we just have to follow that migration, and that's all the work we have to do before. We have to set it up ourselves and investigate it, how we migrate, and that's not the issue anymore. That's one thing about technology. Also, the technology changes. When you go cloud native, instead of setting up your own web services, you just use S3 and just forget about all the things that you had to set up before. The companies we work with. Before we used, especially for the operation side, one big outsourcer. We changed from that to an AWS reseller, and an in-house operations team. We think that is much better. We had that experience already with insourcing our development teams. That's mainly because we find in-source development teams, which are then small contractors that we contract, and we build teams around them. We think that those people are much more devoted to the agency, to the business goals of the agency. They really work for the agency. They are dependent on the agency for their work, not just. They don't have there's not the overhead of a big outsourcer which has his own goals. No, those small contractors that really work for AWV. Another thing that I see there that's really amazing is that those people are much more because actually when we moved away from the outsourcer, I just picked one out of the outsourcer and then got them working for me, and the job satisfaction is a lot higher because they see that the things that they do for the agency, they see the results of what they do, and they really see the impact on the citizens' life of what they are doing, where before they didn't have all that kind of stuff. So that's more or less the sum up of the companies, how we changed working with companies.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. So, those were the formal questions I wanted to ask, and really I'd like to open it to the audience now. Does anybody out there have any questions for our panelists? Yes, please. Yeah. Third row.
It was amazing to hear you all. You have some great stories to tell, so I'm really inspired from some of the key facts that you show, especially you, Philip, because it's to understand that I don't know how many millions of functions you run, but it was very low cost. But I came from Portugal, and there we have a issue with the public sector, which is they need to know how much they are going to spend to buy something. So for them, cloud is really scary because they cannot predict the cost. I know that probably in 99% of the cases we're going to reduce costs, but that is not enough. They need to be sure because they do RFPs, and then when they buy, they will not pay more than it was defined, you know. So how do you manage that in countries where you are providing these services? Because I really like to understand and explain to our customers, which are public sector, there is a solution for that. They could use the citizens' money way better and save money. And so I would like to understand that.
Can you repeat the question?
I think the basic, if anybody couldn't hear about, the basic crux of the question was, can the guys give any advice on how not only you can save money, but how you can keep those costs constant and controlled over time? Would that be a fair summary of the question?
I would say I really would like to have some good arguments to talk to the public sector guys in Portugal, for instance, to tell them how they can procure and buy cloud services, because they are very limited today. They need to procure. They prefer to invest in capex and not opex.
So how the government can actually procure those cloud
Yeah,
services?
yeah.
Fantastic.
What I would say there, we work with framework contract, just not just with fixed limits and all that kind of stuff, but like a framework contract that we said. Oh, it's not. We don't set it in the market. We just we at AWS we like to hop on work of other people that have done for us, and there are like framework contracts which are then allowing AWS resellers to offer their services. What we do is more or less estimate what we are going to use in a year, and we can do that quite good. So we already run in AWS, and we see the work that's coming, and we are just like take an extra percentage on what we expect to spend in a year. And then we get like the offer and just like go to the whole flow of getting the money fixed and then be able to pay the bills. For us, that's not really an issue. But what I really would like to say there is that AWS allows you to save costs. Going cloud will allow you to save costs, but because if you go cloud and you really go good into the cloud, you will become much more responsive to the business, and your business will notice that, and they will become more hungry. I don't know if you understand what I mean, because they see now that IT is really helping the business and is able to help the business, and they will send more work to you to get it to get fixed. So that they have higher demands for you, and eventually your cost will rise. I can say that now we're not still at the cost of our old outsourcer to run IT, but we are getting there. The cost is going up, but we are delivering much more value for that cost. So I think that also like the management of the people of the agencies you are working with have to like understand that cloud not only will save costs, but it will allow them to work more efficiently, to bring better services to the citizens in the end. That would be my thing.
Thank you very much. But Philip, I think it looks like you wanted to make
I've got some comments on that. Is that, yeah, it's working. For us, all of our public sector contracts are fixed price, and so that very question was my initial challenge when we took on such a large contract with the National Archives. My CFO was constantly asking me how much is it going to cost. So I had to kind of guess based on the traffic stats they'd given us, and I had to pretty much design a traditional model and a traditional system to manage with that capacity. As it was, because of some of the sort of experiments we did, the costs for doing certain things that we budgeted for were a lot less. But it was very difficult, and it's still difficult to this day because it does auto-scale, and if something happens in the UK that causes a lot more traffic to come to our site, then we have to manage those costs. And the way I manage that is I use a third-party external service that gives me real-time monitoring of the billing. Yeah, Cloud Health actually. I went through a whole load of, I tried a few when I was in reInvent, and that's the one I ended. But it's really useful, and the way we also manage costs is I split every AWS account down to custom, or actually the live environment. So we can manage the costs based on that. And yeah, it is a challenge.
It's just commodity at the end. It's just like you tap and you get and you pay.
I mean, one of the ways we've cut costs as well is we now know what capacity we need to run the actual EC2 instances that run the website of the UK Government Web Archive, and we've reserved instance that. So we've committed up front to pay for 3 years, and we know now we've got those for 3 years. We pay per month, but we know that is a very set price that is budgeted for. And the same with the Elasticsearch cluster. We now know what capacity we need to run Elasticsearch for the number of users that we get. The cost savings come in at things where we didn't really account for it in terms of all of our social media archiving platform runs in Lambda, and as you've seen with the Lambda pricing, it's pretty negligible. The cost is some months zero to run our entire social media archiving platform because we don't exceed the 1 million free Lambda functions you get. So there are ways of saving costs, but it does take quite a lot of work and an understanding of how the cloud actually operates.
But you still take the risk of estimating and providing the price if the cost goes higher?
That is a risk.
You are going to lose money, not the government.
Not the government, no. So they've outsourced that to us, but I have to think up original ideas to keep those costs low.
Would you agree?
Yeah.
Would you agree that the way the IT services are procured right now, it's not the best way?
No, not at all. I mean, I've been asked for a cost per website archive recently in a tender, and there's some websites that are massive and there's some that are tiny. Yeah.
Well, I've just started very, very smoothly because you already covered quite good. On our case, I think, since I'm not dealing directly with the contractual part, I cannot offer you directly all the details, but we are working with framework contracts as well, and from time to time, I know that my colleagues are dealing from the cloud team that is doing all the contractual part, they're activating specific contracts for a specific amount of money, which are out of this budget allocated as a maximum top limit for the framework contract, which means that they activate regularly additional amounts of money on those on this bigger contract. Actually, this is leading to some situations that have to be taken into consideration. For example, when I need to reserve a capacity, if I reserve the capacity for a full year, I have to synchronize with my colleagues because it might be that that moment in the current specific contract there is not enough budget in order to cover that reserved capacity. So it involves some synchronization, some interactions. Further, what I would recommend as well is tagging proper resources, especially if you are providing services on multiple customers. So in many cases, you will have to provide them information in the actual consumption in an OPEX approach, and with a proper tagging, you will be able to do it. Without this, it's going to be very difficult.
And I'd add, just to finish that, at AWS we have a team that spends a lot of time trying to collect that best practice from different governments around the world and help governments to share it between them so that they can learn how different people have found solutions to that sort of problem. I can put you in touch with the right person to talk to about that. We've got about 4 minutes left, so if anybody else has another question, I think we've got just about enough time to answer it. Does anybody have a question? Great stuff. Thank you very much, Patrick.
So, 2 questions, I think. First one, do you all have a single cloud policy, so a single cloud provider? And the second one is, how much do you trust your cloud, the data in the cloud? And do you still keep a copy of your data somewhere else? Or are you already mature that you just trust it so much as you can leave it only in the cloud?
Certainly for the National Archives, we transfer the data to them. I mean, it is the UK National Archives, we can't lose it. That does then end up in vaults in Kew. That's the way they operate for some of our other clients. We do trust it. I just make sure I've got lots of copies. I've also got MFA delete, so no one can delete without going into our safe. Delete any of the data that is part of the archives, and I transfer it around the world a lot. So there are many copies.
We also we rely on AWS to keep store of the data. We don't have nothing on site, nothing.
In our case, we do rely on AWS as well for the data for the websites that are there. Data is public. Occasionally we do have some backups for some specific projects because they are used in the continuous integration and the continuous testing, so we do need some specific copies for development purposes, but the real backup and all the data is there. So it's, and we deployed clearly from the beginning and oriented toward zero downtime using multiple availability zones and all of that stuff.
And the other one, the single cloud provider, was thinking about that one.
Single cloud provider?
Or maybe multiple clouds. You don't need to mention any names, but just...
Okay, so maybe I can answer. So actually currently we are using 3 different cloud providers, so we are not using a single one. We do use mainly AWS at the moment for the services that are offered are the better fit to what we desire to have in place. But from the beginning we focused on the exit strategy. So that was one of the important points of having in place, because due to the typical approach of framework contracts, we'd have no information if in the future the same cloud provider will be available. So one of the important points for us, for administration, was effectively having an exit strategy that will allow us either to move back to data center or move to another cloud provider in the future. So I hope this is answering to...
For us also, we use multiple cloud providers. We use mainly AWS for running our hard workload. But for instance, in the road business, and Google has some very good map services and APIs around all that kind of stuff. And really, why not? It's just there, take it. And that's really what we do. Take the best out of the market.
For us, we took a decision at a board level to concentrate mainly on Amazon, because we can leverage some of these unique services that we don't get with other cloud providers. In the past, we did actually use multiple providers, but I actually found the reliability of some of the other ones not as good as Amazon, shall we say. From a data point of view, it is something I'm just considering, is putting data, the actual raw data, in another cloud.
Thank you very much for the question, and thanks guys for the answers. So we're in perfect timing. The clock is flashing, telling us that the time is up for this session. If anybody had any other questions, then I guess we'll be here for a few minutes after the session closes. Thank you very much indeed for attending. Thanks for your questions, and thank you especially to our panel members, to Florent, to Bert, to Philip. Really appreciate you joining us today. Thanks a lot.